All right, okay, I'm doing it again. I'm starting it again. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today is Wednesday, June 26th. Today, the planet Mercury is in Cancer in a trine to Saturn in Pisces. And I did a video the other day about Jupiter and Gemini squaring Saturn in Pisces. And this is a common thing going on because, as you know, Jupiter rules Pisces, Mercury rules Gemini, and so it's all connected, right? Now, the thing is that I have tried recording 2 videos already. Both of these went off the rails in directions that I was not happy with, and so I'm going on a principle of third time's a charm to give it one more try. But I think it's sort of indicative of the fact that the moon is in Pisces, applying to Saturn right now, and Saturn is the greater malefic. It is an obstacle. It is that little voice that says maybe you shouldn't be doing this, and that maybe it's not a good idea, and that maybe you should do something else, right? And so I'm listening to that voice and trying to just do it anyways. But what I notice anyways is that there is the first of all, water signs. Water signs is a tendency towards being more emotional or activating emotional stuff. And the other day, if you notice, I did this pattern where I made a video where I was talking about, like, I always bring up this stuff about psychiatric diagnosis and disability and stuff like that. And there's a certain emotional thing that goes with that, of feeling ostracized and isolated, or having to justify my decisions for different respects in my life. And there's some kind of an emotional, like, there's this idea of, like, differentiation, right? Where you can differentiate between the intellectual and the emotional, and there's this idea that with Mercury's in a water sign and Saturn's in a water sign, and with Jupiter in an air sign, right? So there's still a bit of that air influence going on because the ruler of Pisces is in an air sign. And what I've been noticing is that there's often this criticism that I've noticed about being too into, if you're too in your head, if you're too into a conceptual perspective, an intellectual perspective of things, that there may be something that's happening at the emotional level that you run off into a world of abstraction and a world of intellectualization away from the emotions, and or else, like, you're trying to do something which is kind of like has a certain air of intellectual detachment, in the sense that you can deliver a message that, regardless of your emotional state, you can put together a logical, rational idea that is divorced from the messiness of emotions and attachment and, like, interpersonal needs and all this kind of stuff, and just deliver a clear idea that stands on its own terms, and as a statement that does something regardless of whatever, trying to, like, be something that I put out in the world because I want people to like me, I want to make friends with people, all that kind of stuff. That you can sort of divorce your emotional self from the intellect and have a purely intellectual statement to make some kind of a point, right? But at the other hand, the problem is like when the emotional self gets mixed up in that, and the emotional self is sort of like, if I am able to craft an idea intellectually that is um, impressive enough, then it's like, maybe if I make this like logical, rational, airy, detached thing good enough, then it will impress people, and then people will like me, right? But then at the same time, there's also, once that starts getting mixed up in there, there's also this kind of like, well, wait a minute, maybe also there's certain things that I could say that are true, or that are rationally logical, or that I can make a certain argument, but that if I make an argument along these certain lines, people aren't going to like me. Maybe I will just piss people off. Maybe I will just come off as being arrogant, or being intellectually superior, and all my friends will hate me for it, right? And I think that is one of the things that like once I get this issue out of the way, like once I can kind of like remove, like if I can separate the part of me that is basically, there's maybe some wounded part, or maybe there could be multiple wounds at different developmental stages, right? Like you could have my preteen wounded child, or my teenage adolescent wounds, or wounds all throughout my life, or I've stalled at different developmental stages or whatever. And these act as sort of sub-personalities which are trying to hijack my intellectual process, because they are like, well, wait, if you make this in such a way that impresses the right people, or like somehow, like you're putting out some sort of intellectual thing, and people will think you're cool, people will like you, and people will want to be friends with you, and then we can like make this thing that you're doing actually meet some sort of core emotional need for belonging and acceptance, or else to look at what you're doing and say that whatever, like I'm somehow beholden, like certain arguments that I want to make because they rationally make sense. There's some sort of intellectual argument I can make, but I don't want to make that argument because I am afraid that people won't like me, that people will think I'm arrogant or a snob, and because my arrogance and my snobbery will just make me that much more isolated, or that much more separate from the people around me, and it will just sort of be digging my hole deeper into this pit of a kind of arrogant intellectual superiority that doesn't actually meet my emotional needs, right? And I think that with this trine between Saturn and Pisces and Mercury in Cancer, and with also the rulership of Jupiter in Gemini, the square from Gemini to Pisces, that kind of stuff, this is coming to mind right now, because the thing is that like there are all sorts of things that the intellect can do, the mind can do. There are all sorts of things that could be rationally true or correct or valid arguments to make, but there's the question of what matters to me at more of a sentimental level, or having. There's also this thing where it's like, it may not necessarily be about like getting in touch with the inner child, but if you think about the difference between human beings and animals, right? That animals are like pack animals. They want to have a pack. They want to have belonging. They want to have their little animal friends to pal around with. And whereas the human being, as the human being develops and like if you look at the human development, and look, I'm just going to go there. There's this thing to do with colonialism, right? And I have to admit that I'm not going to play up like I'm some guy who's like all friends with all the negative people. But I do live in the West Coast, and I have to admit that growing up on the West Coast, I knew quite a few Indigenous people, right? And so there's some kind of thing that I feel like there's a issue that is it's like not to do with nationalism and patriotism, but rather the geopolitics of an area that I feel like, as a guy growing up in Western Canada with exposure to a lot of Indigenous people, it's just a perspective that you get from just developing in that environment that I wouldn't have if I was like, living in England my whole life, right? Or I wouldn't have this perspective if I was like living in like, Germany or Italy or something like that my whole life. There's a perspective that comes from growing up in this neighborhood, in this country, in this environment that has to do with Indigenous life. And the things, I'm no expert on this, right? But there's something to do with the tensions around colonialism and the Indigenous perspective. And one of the things that I'm only getting this from reading books, and I don't even know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm misguided, right? But the idea is that before the colonial invaders came to Canada, it was common for Indigenous people to live in long houses, right? It's common for Indigenous people, the long house is one, you have the whole bunch of people living under the same roof, right? And so Marshall McLuhan makes this idea that when it comes to privacy, or the notion of privacy, or the notion of individuality versus the idea of community involvement, that this is entirely a colonial idea, right? Because from an Indigenous perspective, now the thing is, I don't know, I wasn't there, I have no idea of what life was like for Indigenous people prior to colonialism. I'm only getting this from books. But the basic idea is that the Indigenous people were more communally oriented. They were more likely to all live under the same roof. And there's this idea of like the development. If there's this controversy where people don't want to see Western man as being more developed as Indigenous people. But the truth is that, there are certain areas, namely with science and technology, that obviously the Western man was a bit more developed. You can make arguments that, like, if to commit acts of genocide and conquering and stuff like that may have been, that could be its own kind of brutality. Maybe that's its own kind of savagery, right? But taking this perspective of colonialism and collective belonging, the need for community, that the undeveloped Indigenous person is more in a community, and the idea of Western developmental psychology is all oriented in a way to separate the person from their family and create systems of basically, like, and this is basically what the residential schools were. You had these backwards, savage people who were, in this sort of thing. We need to figure out a way to separate the young children from their parents, put them into a reform school where we basically drill their culture out of them and take what was once a thriving community and turn them into traumatized, abused, atomized, isolated, wounded people who are in. And then what do you get? You get spirals of addiction. You get people who are completely fucked up because of this, right? And this process is what we call individuation, right? Developing away from the primitive savagery of relying on your family, of relying on a community, to being strong, independent individuals who don't have, like, because the whole thing about, like, if you want to have friends, if you want to have a community, you're basically like a little baby. You're like a little toddler who wants to go to preschool and have all your little baby friends. To be a grown-up adult is basically to accept the fact that you may just be isolated and lonely for the rest of your life, but you're like living in like a kind of like an Arctic outpost, right? Where you're like, I'm a guy who's like shooting off into outer space in a satellite, and I've said goodbye to my humanity. I've said goodbye to what makes me like an animal, like a fuzzy little mammal that needs like love and attention and connection with other people. And I'm just like a sort of operating at the level of intellectual superiority and not having any need for connection or love and belonging or anything like that, and just being like the more that I can do this, the more I am a superior because I don't have these needs which hold, because I can say what I want to say. It doesn't matter if that wins me friends or if that alienates me, because what matters is not whether or not I get anything out of this, whether people like me for it. It's whether it's true in a logical, fashionable, scientific, rational level, right? And on this level, it's like, a person may not, we're evolving away from having to need families, having to need communities, having to need friends, to being people who can just be completely like plugged into, like you're just like a brain in a jar sending electrical signals to each other. You don't even need a body anymore, basically, right? And this is so, like, if you notice, I'm maybe being a little bit sarcastic, right? And this is the problem that this is the third video that I've tried recording, and this is basically, like, I find I run into a problem in the sense that, like, well, admittedly, I had some kind of intellectual idea to make a video today, but I'm running up against some kind of obstacle I'm basically, the intellectual idea that I had, I've basically thrown it out the window, and I'm just kind of freestyling, right? And I'm freestyling on this idea that there's a part of me which is perhaps, like, therapy has this sort of perspective that intellectualization can often be an escape. We're trying to run away from the messy life of emotional problems into a world of abstract intellectualization, or that somehow I am trying to deliver a message, but I have unmet emotional needs that sabotage what I'm trying to do, with the emotion of bitterness, resentment, loneliness, isolation. And there's, like I said, there's this hope that, like, maybe, but people for some reason like the stuff that I do. I don't really know exactly, there could be different people like different things about what I do, but there's this idea that if I have some degree of talent, I have some degree of ability to work with language, to work with ideas, to communicate something, but there's this sense that I don't know why people like what I do exactly, and there's a sense that the people who like what I do like it for the wrong reasons, right? And because for some reason, I think the thing that I want to do is always in danger of alienating people or making people think that I'm arrogant or intellectually, or like I can't, like, the thing that I want to aim for seems counterproductive to my emotional needs, because it seems like if I want to meet my emotional needs, I have to take my intellectual creative process and I have to, like, turn it into something that caters to an audience, or caters to the expectations of, like, let's say the astrology community. I don't even, but the thing is, like, the emotional need, I just basically want to have friends or a community or some sort of, like, social life, basically. And the idea of, like, language and idea and thought and communication being, like, that it doesn't happen in a vacuum, that it happens in the sense of, like, I'm composing an idea to deliver to a audience, and the audience are, I don't know who they are, right? I've got, if I keep getting, the idea is that if I keep doing this, if I keep getting more and more subscribers, and maybe I can reach a certain saturation point, and then that at some point or time will translate into social acceptance, right? And just to be completely straight up here, and I don't know if this is too vulnerable because I am exposing, like, the way I tick, but I mean, I guess in this day and age, we're under a lot of financial, economic pressure, but, like, and I listen to other people. People say that they just, like, they don't have time to talk to people. They don't have time for relationships. They don't have time for socializing. They have to work a lot, or that it's just, like, there's something about it that, like, whatever my desire system, right? My motivation in life is geared towards wanting social inclusion and social belonging, but more often than not, the actual, like, I find myself throughout my life like a lost puppy dog looking around for somebody to adopt it, like to belong to a community, to belong to a certain group. But even when but the thing, I have to admit that there's been no point in time where I have had a sense of belonging to a group and had that being like satisfying. It's like the hungry ghost, right? And I think this could also go maybe with Saturn, right, in Pisces, and this Trine to these Cancer planets. That there's like, as this hungry ghost is like, it's hungry, but there's some sort of obstacle that like they call it being like a big belly and a skinny neck, where it's like you're really hungry, but you can only eat like a little tiny pea, and then you're like, oh, I ate a little tiny pea and it sort of helped, but not really, I feel like I need to like. In order to meet whatever the hunger or the need is, I'm gonna need a lot more than this. I can't get the stuff down into my belly and digest it and feel sustained by it. And if I get anything, it's sort of I don't know if it actually, like, if I do actually make friends with people or have some sort of social interaction, it could actually just further make the problem worse, because it's like, oh, this is, it's like, finally I'm having a friend, or I'm having a social interaction, but this person is obviously not the person that I'm looking for. This is obviously not the social dynamic that I'm looking for. This is obviously just further inflaming the problem, where I feel like I can't find where I belong. I can't find where I fit in. That I feel like, and I have some sort of idea about what's going on, but I can't express this, because then the people are just going to not like me. The people are going to further reject me, and all my ideas are going to be something that I'm going to have to work on in isolation, and I'm going to have to write them in books, and I'm going to be afraid to publish them, because I don't know, they don't seem to do me any good in terms of getting what I want, right? Because I don't, it doesn't, it seems like the emotional thing of what I want and what my ideas are, they're not working in cooperation with each other. Like, one of them's leading me in this direction where I don't know where it's going, but it certainly doesn't seem to lead towards, social involvement, community involvement, relationships, friendships. It seems to lead me out in the middle of nowhere, and with the people that I'm trying to, and then you get the sense of, like, you're trying to develop these ideas, you get the sense that the people that you're trying to develop ideas with are just gonna hate you, because you're going in, like, you're going in a different direction than they are. You're doing something that they don't approve of, and so that you're further just digging your hole into this sort of like space of being in exile, being isolated, being separate from everybody, and that all your intellectual work has to be done in secret, because it's just going to alienate you and make people not like you, right? And so this is like, the problem is that this is a creative obstacle to me. Or the thing is, I would basically just put aside the emotional thing and just work at the level of the ideas themselves in a kind of more of a sterile, abstract way. But the thing is, the thing about the culture online, the culture around that I got into around like spiritual emergency and people doing support groups, there's this whole idea that there's like anti-intellectualism. People don't want you to detach from your emotional self and then go off into this realm of intellectual abstraction and then make rational, logical arguments that don't have anything to do with whether or not they're going to meet your needs for social belonging. And all the while having an air of intellectual superiority, right? And there's this idea that regardless of whatever the content is, regardless of whatever it is you actually have to say, the very fact that you are deciding to go in the direction of the intellect rather than the emotions is a bit, you're going for the head rather than the heart. You're going for this thing about like what makes the white man think he's superior to the indigenous people, because basically the white man is like, look, like these people, they live all together in a this is basically it. They're like, the white man is like, these people live together as a community under the same roof. They don't have the same sense of being separated independent individuals. They're more of like this more amorphous blob of community compared to us. And we as white people have figured out how to kill people through warfare more efficiently. So it's more convenient for us to just go in there, and these people that are in communities and have a certain, we can just kill them all, take all their stuff, and because we are able to do, they don't have any way to defend themselves, that we are superior to them, because if they their whole culture, we can just annihilate it and take over, and we win. And then people will, like, basically women, social belonging. What do you want? If you're a woman and you do you want to have people with guns and weapons who make you feel secure, or do you want to be with in an amorphous log cabin waiting for the colonizers to come and kill you, right? And this is basically what our society is like. You have to be a violent male who's cut off from his emotions, with the cold and icy logic, being like, brass tacks, we can just kill you and take your stuff, and if you can't defend, we win, and all the women will like us because we'll give them a sense of security. But no, never mind the fact that we're basically like cold-blooded genocidal maniacs who have no, we're gonna kill, conquer, take what's ours, and that is going to be the basis of our society. And then we're going to, this is the world we live in, basically, right? And if you understand, like, there's a sort of like split between the intellectual side that somehow that manages to, like, in a very cold, sterile, icy way, just detach itself from the emotional reality that maybe that's not the right thing. But that's our history. We can't go back and change it now. That's the history. And so I'm a white guy on stolen native land, and I have to basically feel, in this political climate, I have to be perpetually apologizing for having ground under my feet to stand on. The fact that I have a house, the fact that I have land, the fact is, like, I have to, it's not, I have no right to this. It's stolen land. We have to give it back. And that means that there's also a housing crisis, right? There's nowhere to live. So basically, like, the fact that I have a place to live means I'm an asshole, and I have to give everything up and be homeless on the streets, and then hang out with a bunch of junkies, and then they'll be my community, basically, right? That's basically where we're at with this, right? Because nobody, if I have land, if I have a sense of security, and I'm just like some privileged white guy asshole who has intellectual ideas, it's illegitimate, basically, right? Because I'm just using my position of privilege to have a superior, and it's basically, at the end of the day, it's like a postmodern power complex, because it's all just about, who's got the guns, who's got the money, who's got the power, we'll kill you, and then we decide what's right, and the women want to be with us because they don't want to be killed. Like, that's all it is, right? And so I've tried, like, this is the whole problem, is that, like, but you can see, though, that it's like I don't know, I'm kind of being, I end up going to this pattern of being, like, overly sarcastic or facetious or, like, sardonic, bitter black sense of humor, and like that goes with Saturn, Trine, Mercury. So maybe like, I don't know, like, there's something about this which is like the emotions of these water signs is like I'm frustrated because I don't get along with people, I guess, or I don't know who the people that I would get along with, the people that I get along with all decided it would be a better idea to not live in Canada, basically, right? The people that I tend to get along with unanimously think that Canada is not a good place to live, and they have all fled to other countries, right? And the only reason why I'm in Canada is because I don't have a way to make money, and I'm reliant on the government to pay my bills, right? And that if I was able to figure out like if a way to make money and then be independent, it would be smarter just to go somewhere else and not live here. And so this whole circumstance of me living where I live with my family is all predicated on the fact that I'm not economically productive, and that I'm basically seen as an nobody has friends anymore. It's just husbands and wives living these socially atomized nuclear families. And as somebody who's not economically productive, it doesn't have a fucking chance in hell to be able to pay for the cost of living here. I'm basically stuck being an overgrown adolescent child who is a constant sort of like in this baby kind of like crying for my bottle at my mom's house, because if I wasn't like this, then I would be a strong individual, independent man who could just do what you had to do and wasn't didn't have like this crying baby who wanted love and belonging and emotional support, hijacking whatever it was I was doing with the emotions of bitterness, resentment, and that kind of stuff, right? So this is the problem. There's a mixed up kind of thing where I want to do something intellectual, but I have all these emotions of bitterness and jealousy and disappointment that colors what I do and hijacks it, and then I end up like making something that I realize. I think that I'm going to just further or maybe I'm complaining too much. Or I've got friends who, I have a friend who visited me when I was really sick in the hospital, and then, he doesn't talk to me, right? Like, he only comes to talk to me if I'm on the verge of death, and then if I try to express my emotions online, I just get accused of being a complainer or something like that, right? I just have to man up and be tough, right? And not complain and get a job. And then after that, truth is, he probably still wouldn't hang out with me, right? Like, this whole thing is like this idea that like maybe if I just fit in and like get a job and do all the hardworking man stuff, then I will like fit in. But the thing is that people that do that are socially isolated, right? It's not that by doing that will get me a community of people that are like that. Chances are that I will just be in doing the same thing everybody else does and feeling the same thing everybody else does, and it's like everybody's just too busy to have social lives, or everybody basically the idea is that like you just get a wife and your wife is your one connection that you have, where your wife is somehow responsible for managing all your emotional problems or something like that. And to have a friend, nobody has friends anymore, because it's just like having a friend makes you feel like a baby, right? It's like having a friend is like you might as well be playing N64 GoldenEye, staying up, drinking too many Pepsis, because like that's basically what friendship is, right? Like you're just regressing back to like being 12 years old and having like pizza parties, and like adults are just bitter, old, lonely people who hate each other, or basically suspicious. Like they can't socialize with anybody, because if you were to like, the whole time you'd be worried that somebody was going to fuck your wife, basically, right? So you can't. So there's no way you're going to have like a party or something like that, because like there might be, who knows what could happen, right? Or like so it's like there's no point to doing anything, right? Because like your progression, your development is basically just to make yourself part of the war machine. We're going to go off and kill people, and it's not going to be something that's going to lead you to like having a little fun little group of people to go out and do fun things with. We got to man up. It's war. We got to fucking kill some people, right? This is just Canada. Our military spending. We're not spending enough money on the military, right? We're too concerned with stupid things like environmentalism, making sure that we don't clear, like we, in here in BC, if we wanted to be able to afford to drive, maybe we should put some fucking pipelines in. Maybe we should cut down some more trees, right? Maybe we need to figure out a way to like build some weapons to sell to countries so people can kill each other, and put our childish emotions behind us, and embrace the fucking war machine, and because that's what real manhood is about. Once you're at that level, you don't give a fuck about having little kids. You're not gonna, like, what are you gonna do? Go and play fucking GoldenEye 007? Oh, haha, I shot you. No, we're not doing that. We got real guns now. Now we can really fucking kill some people, right? And that's what being an adult is all about, right? Because that's like, how did my family rise above being just a bunch of like working class coal miners to being the bourgeois intellectual that you see to you today? It was the army. It was that my grandfather became a fighter pilot, right? That if I join the military industrial complex, they will reward me handsomely, and if I then figure out a way to incorporate that into my message, not being against the war machine but in support of it, then the algorithm will reward me handsomely, because I am reinforcing the dynamic that we just need to give in, accept Big Brother, and go to war, kill people, forget about social belongings, forget about inclusivity. It's every man for himself, but that's not what I want. I'm being sarcastic, right? But like that's how it feels, right? So this is, again, I tried making, I had an idea today, and I had an obstacle. I had some sort of obstacle where I was coming up against, and I recorded 3 videos. This is the 3rd try, and I'm just going to go for this one. And this is the problem, is that like I have a certain intellectual idea that's being completely obstructed. My intellectual idea is not being expressed in this video. Instead, there is an emotion. I have, at some emotional level, some wounded crybaby that's sabotaging my intellectual process, because it's afraid that the ideas are going to be counterproductive to meeting my emotional needs. Because that's basically, everything I do online just reinforces that. You try to be smart, everybody's just like, we need to focus. You're in your head. You need to come back down to the heart level. You need to leave the ideas behind. Stop reading so many books. Go, do what your heart asks of you, and become a consumer. Start a family. Give up trying to be smart. Just have kids. Work a job. Enjoy the life of being a dad in suburbia, doing what everybody else does. Don't think too much. Don't question things. Don't try to improve your mind. And the thing is, like, the good news is that if you need, in order to start a family, right? You're gonna want to just get whatever job you can that is a stable source of income, and you're not gonna like it. You're gonna have you're mentally ill, so you're gonna take these drugs, and the drugs you take, this is the good news, right? All this intellectual stuff, all these ideas, once you start taking these drugs for a while, you're not going to be able to read those books anymore. You're not going to be able to think like that, right? You're not going to be able to do anything except for, you're going to want to maybe drink some beer. Then when you put together the alcohol with the pharmaceutical drugs, they're going to sort of work to degrade your brain over time. You're going to start to put on weight. You're going to be fat. And you're going to give up on thinking you have anything to offer the world other than basically just reproducing children. The children are going to be your priority. So, and you're going to realize that whatever idea you have in terms, you think it's some sort of smart philosophy, you're going to realize it's stupid, because it's just going to be something that is going to make women not like you, and that now you have a child to look after, and your ideas are going to do nothing to support your children. You just have to continue to take drugs, and you're gonna have this big book collection, and you're gonna be like, my God, I've been wasting my time reading all these books. You're gonna give them away, and instead you're going to start watching the Super Bowl. And because you watch the Super Bowl, there's naturally just going to be whoever's in your neighborhood also likes the Super Bowl will invite you over. You'll have a beer with them. You'll be kind of fresh, it'll be okay, because the part of you that'll be frustrated that you're not going to be able to have an intellectual conversation, that will be broken down and degraded by the alcohol and the psychotic or the pharmaceutical drugs. You'll have so much chemicals in your brain that you won't be able to think straight, except for just reinforcing the idea that being, you have kids. So, as long as you have kids, you're doing the right thing. That's all you have to think about. And because this is all in Cancer, the sign of Cancer is very familial, it's very sentimental, and the fact that your little Johnny will look up at you with big watering eyes will just make it all worthwhile. And you're like, what the fuck was I even thinking trying to read books? What was I even thinking about trying to what I was going to do? I started a YouTube channel where I was going to try to communicate some idea that other people weren't already talking about. Like, what the hell? What an asshole I was. I thought I had some sort of special contribution to society. I thought there was some sort of thing, I can't believe it. I thought I had to write a book or something. I thought I had to make a contribution to our culture. But no, I just had to figure out whatever I had to do to find somebody who wanted to fuck me. That's all it was all about. It was just me trying to figure out a way to get laid, and trying to obviously, if you want to get laid, you're not going to do it by trying to be smart, right? No, you just got to go. Most of the people, the people that I know, I have got cousins that they, instead of being raised to Planned Parenting, they some girl that they probably weren't even serious about, they just knocked up, and then they had to get married because she didn't want an abortion, right? And now they have belonging, they have family, they have a guy with a stable job because he's just locked into this thing that he happened accidentally. If you were intelligent, if you were actually consciously making choices in you may never you may just be in a stupid situation where you don't have a job, you don't have a family, you're just a lonely dude with a bunch of books to read who's frustrated about it, thinking that if you make your funny idea good enough, then that's going to get you the same thing that the guy who just knocked up some random girl at the bar. This is the whole point. You should have just been dumb from the beginning, because then you would have gotten laid with your teenage girlfriend, and then you would have had a little kid by now. And then you could be doing the same astrology channel from the position of a father, right? And you could be this Saturn Mercury alignment has been just reinforcing to me the values of what it means to make sacrifices, to be a father figure in my child's life, and that I have been going through something recently where I've been hearing about certain, philosophers that sound interesting, or there's been certain podcasts or people having conversations, and I've been it hurts me, because there's this part of me that when I was younger, I had a dream that I would be able to make some sort of contribution with my writing to society and all this kind of stuff. But I look at little Johnny, and I'm so glad I put aside I laid those foolish ambitions to rest, and now I'm just I don't bother with that stuff, because it doesn't do anything to support little Johnny and his future. And making that sacrifice of not being intellectual to raise my family has given me so much belonging that I feel so, I've made the right choice by being a parent. But unfortunately, that's not where I'm at in my life. So Thanks for watching. All right, well, see you next time. This has been a kind of more of just a free-flowing freestyle that is coming from whatever emotions I have, rather because I've got some sort of idea that I'm not expressing because I it's inappropriate or something, or maybe I don't know why. Because I feel like if I went into that direction, I just get myself in trouble, and I don't know how to meet my emotional needs. Thank you for watching.